At present, I'll give the floor to our American friend. We were talking about the United States, and I think it will be right if Jeffrey Sommers, professor of Wisconsin Milwaukee University.
I'll take less. If it does, please stop me. Okay. I'm just going to make my remarks very brief in consideration of the other speakers and the opportunity that we might have to discuss.
You've got enough to apparently stop us.
Yes, I'll speak more slowly. Okay, thank you, Ursula. The first thing that I want to state is that there is no dichotomy between efficiency and justice, and that is what we have learned since this crisis. The two are compatible, and indeed, without justice, we see that the economic system takes a turn towards the inefficient. We have been in a protracted period of economic crisis for some 40 years. And the crisis in the United States and in most other countries was addressed by suppression of wages. The theory was, the economic theory was, that there was not enough investment capital available to invest in the economy, to introduce the innovations, which would then bring us to a renewed period of growth. Well, we've undertaken this great experiment. We have suppressed wages, and we have not seen the innovation and investment in the real economy ensue. Let me give one example from my country, the United States. In 1968, the minimum wage, if you adjust for inflation, and if you adjusted for productivity, today, if you set it at the same level that it was in 1968, would be $22 an hour. $22 an hour. Instead, that minimum wage today is only $7.25 an hour. So again, if we would have remained at those 1968 levels, again, adjusting for both inflation and productivity growth, it would have been $22 an hour. Instead, only $7.25. Thus, we have taken our lowest paid workers and we have slashed their wages by 2/3. Now, this has had a rippling effect through the entire wage structure because the absolute minimum floor will lift everyone else's wages up. So we've done this. And what has been the result? Have we seen huge amounts of money flow into the real economy? Just the opposite. Instead, as we know, it has gone into the financial sector. Now, in 1970, about 15% of corporate profits were derived from the financial sector. So the year 1970 was a date at which the United States economy was still growing very robustly, and about 15% of corporate profits were required for that financial intermediation to occur in order to provide the liquidity and the investment which was needed to make sure the economy could move forward. Today, that rate is 40%. We have gone from 15% to 40% of our corporate profits into the financial sector. Has economic growth increased? Have living standards risen? The answer, of course, is a resounding no. And so what we see is that instead of building a system in which investment is encouraged in the real sector of production, instead it has gone to rents. It has gone to rents. And we see that as a pattern globally. Now, I wish to return to a point that Dr. Wallerstein mentioned earlier today. He said that capitalism was the opposite of markets and free markets. I wish to reinforce that point. If one looks at the classical economic tradition from Adam Smith up, in other words, from the late 18th century through to the 19th century, when they spoke about free markets, they were talking about something very different than just letting markets do whatever they wanted to do. When they spoke about free markets, they were generally talking about freeing markets from rents. Freeing markets from rent seekers, whether those be in the private sector or the public sector. So who was ever extracting rents from the real economy capitalism as we see it today, and of course there are many varieties, has become very burdened with rent seeking. And it's typically the financial sector, at least in the United States, which has been extracting the most rents. So again, it was freedom from having an economy that was being exploited by rent seekers. And in fact, in the classical economic tradition, what they were talking about creating was an economy in which the public sector would be actually robust and would actually create common public goods that would maximize the ability of the market to work most efficiently. Let me give you some more examples. In the 19th century, many of the public services that we now enjoy were provided by the private sector. Everything from water to garbage collection, etc. Now, and even sometimes, of course, with the creation of roads, oftentimes built privately, toll roads. What often happened was that organized criminal gangs, sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between an organized criminal gang and a large business. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not. Yes, and garbage, water, provision of roads, etc. And they extracted, through monopoly power, huge rents from the economy. And so what began to occur was a revolution of sorts in the American economy, in which these began to become provided by the public sector very cheaply, thus removing costs from the real economy. So we need to remember our own economic history. Back to that point, thank you, I will sum up here, of the driving down of wages. The crisis has reached a stage of high cannibalism. It is just devouring the economy. It is devouring social benefits and social provisions. So in the United States, for example, we now have these debates about getting rid of our medical system for pensioners and privatizing it, and of reducing our national pension system, the payments. This is all a consequence of the need to maintain high levels of profitability in an economy which is not as productive as it once was, and which is not investing as much in production as it once did. I'll conclude my remarks there. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Джеффри.
Это очень интересное рассуждение. Они мне напоминают вот эту нашу историю, что мы перенимаем иногда у американцев не лучшие образцы поведения. Когда мы в ЖКХ, например, освободились от государственного диктата и ввели управляющие конторы, то как раз началось то, что ты говорил сейчас, как в Америке, когда public goods берут на себя частные предприятия, то абсолютно безответственное поведение начинается и не с кого спросить. И сегодня Владимир Путин очень обеспокоен этим делом, что когда были ЖКХ, все-таки хоть как-то можно было регулировать их тарифы. А теперь управляющая компания, непонятно, кто там бенефициар, кто где находится, кто собственник. И они, конечно, могут творить чудеса с этими тарифами. А предполагалось, что прозвучит звонок в вашей квартире, заходит дядя Коля, предлагает за 5 рублей сменить вам кран. А через 10 минут заходит дядя Петя, который за 3 рубля. А вы будете выбирать. Это такие сказки вы наслушались. А теперь вся страна стоит на ушах. Вообще, даже вот говорят, что новоиспеченный москвич, то есть этот новоиспеченный русский Жерар Депардье, после того, как получил счет за коммунальные услуги в городе Саранске, опять попросил французское гражданство. Итак, мы продолжаем.